If you want to learn how to make Ghibli style textures in Substance Painter, the latest course from the 3D coloring book was made for you. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to consider getting the course. Now let's get into this week's video.
Hello everyone, in today's video I'd like to show you how I managed to create this character. I've made this throughout Bruno Jimenez 3D character class at New Edge, and I used 3ds Max ZBrush for sculpting, retopo and UVs, then Marmoset toolbag for baking and rendering, and Substance Painter for texturing. The main goal of this project was to create a character that would fit in the Overwatch style with a side of Diablo. So, how do we get from this to this? Well, first of all, before jumping into ZBrush or 3ds Max, we need to find a concept. And this is what I did. It's nothing fancy, just a quick sketch which shows a front view, a back view, and a side view for the weapon. I have this front view as well that helped me find the silhouette into ZBrush. I have some more iteration here. So once you have a concept, we need to gather some reference. So I took from some reference from Overwatch. I have Reinhardt here, and some Genji parts here. This just helped me to find what shapes they were using into Overwatch. I have some other texture reference, like this one. I really like this one. It helped me a lot throughout the texture process. And I have some Diablo reference for the texture as well. I really wanted to capture a Diablo feel into the texture and more of Overwatch style in the shapes. And I have some 2D concepts to help me find some more shapes as well. So now that we have all of this, let's go into ZBrush. So what I like to do into ZBrush is to create a blocking in order to capture the silhouette, and I use a lot this part of ZBrush which shows you the silhouette of your character. I try to match the side and front view, and it's just a matter of importing some, inserting some basic shapes, and a matter of just using the move brush and some Z-modeler as well for like extruding here. And once I have this kind of blocking, I use the technique which is pretty simple. I just export this mesh into 3ds Max and start refining some of the parts. So at first with this character I refined the arm, I think. Yeah, here it is. So after exporting my blocking into 3ds Max, I just start refining the shapes, and I'm just going to show it to you in 3ds Max right now. Once I'm in Max, what I do is I import my blocking. So as you can see, this one is a bit more refined than the ones that I just showed you in ZBrush, but it's still crap. But it's enough for me to refine it to this stage. So what I do from this is I pick a part, let's say this one, I detached it, move it a bit further. Then I create a plane. Just put it in place, scale it a bit. So I add an edit poly on top. And what I use is a freeform tab, which is normally what you would use to retopo. It's kind of what I do here. So I use draw on surface. I pick my object. I add some offset, like 0.05. And what I do is then I just use the extend button and begin to place my points in order to match my shape. What I do as well is I add an edit poly on top and activate show end result. So it's going to give me this orange line, which helps me to see a bit better what I'm doing. So after that, I just extend my points and try to match my shape. Can add some more loops if you want to have more control, and then use conform. So it's just a matter of adding points and trying to match my shape. So let's say I've finished it, and this is what I ended up with. So as you can see, it's not the same shape at all. I wasn't really happy with what I had, so I decided to do some adjustment directly in Max. So let's remove all the modifiers just to show you what I had. So I just extruded some edges in order to have kind of this shape going a bit up. Then I added a shell, and I did some further adjustment with just moving points and adding some details. So I use a crease set in order to crease my edges. It's kind of like adding support edges, but well, without adding support edges. It helps the shape to remain sharp when subdividing. So if I activate my open subdiv modifier, going to see that all the edges that are selected going to maintain their sharpness. I use this process on almost all my character, but as you can see, I do also some modification when you compare it to the blocking. Like for example, the knee, the heel is lower, this part as well. But because the blocking is kind of rough, it's not the point just to give me an idea. Even if I had a concept, I change many things compared to the concept. Because it was my concept, I can do whatever I want with it. So what you have to remember as well is when you're creating this kind of hard surface shape, you want to split them into different parts. It's because it's way easier to sculpt them one by one. And I mean sculpt, I mean polymodeling. Just at least for me, it makes it way easier. Like for example, the shoe is composed of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and some details, so almost 10 parts. Okay, if I begin to split them apart, you see how many parts I have. Highly recommend you to try this method if you're maybe struggling in doing some hard surface. It's way easier to manage it like that. So once I'm done with refining all my shapes, I just export it back to ZBrush, and that's what I'm going to do right now. Back in ZBrush with my clean mesh now. So what I like to do at this stage is to add some details to my metal parts, like a worn effect to it. So the main brushes that I use to create this kind of effect is Orb Pack. I like to use Orb Cracks in order to add some scratches to the metal, and I use some of these pre-made ones as well. And I used this hammered metal brush, which gives me a hammered metal look to it. So before beginning sculpting, I just want to show you, as you can see, this is my mesh just imported back from Max. And as you can see, the topology is not even everywhere, so it's not great for sculpting on that. So what I like to do is to just divide it a few times and dynamesh it with a high value. Just give it some time. And maybe you can see it here, but it gives me an event topology to work with. So I don't know if you can see it here, but I have some pinching issue from my modeling into Max, so it's not a problem. I can just clean it with the edge polish. And if you're wondering what matcap I'm using right now, it's just the Herb Clay Gloss. It's from Herb as well. This one you have to pay for it, but the Herb pack is free, and you can find it on his art station. As you can see, I still have some pinching happening right here. Just cleaning it up. So I don't do a great job, but you should just take your time when doing this kind of stuff. And trying to clean it as good as you can. So now what I like to do is I like to use hammered metal to let's enable backface mask so it won't affect the backside of our mesh. And then just drag it. And that gives me a base to work with. So as you can see, it's pretty good, but I like to break it with the edge polish just to add some variation to it. So to add some variation, I like to switch my size a lot in order to get a lot of randomness, I guess. Okay, that looks good enough, I think. So after that, what I like to do as well is to add some scratches. So you can use either upcrack, I mean, if you want to control your scratches, but if you just want to get fast result, you can use these pre-made ones, like for example the slash clean. And yeah, you should enable your backface mask with it again, or else you're going to affect the other side of your mesh. Always check your mesh from afar, so you can see a bit better of what you're doing. Now, if I want some more control on my scratches, I just use the up cracks too. So what I like to do as well is to if I want to add some warm effect to the edges, I just use trim dynamic. I just begin to break my edges with it. When doing this, you can be a bit messy. You don't want it to look a bit too clean. So you can do some heavy brush stroke in order to break the monotony of the shape. And this is what I'll do on all the pieces of my character. And as you can see, this part I just did into ZBrush. I didn't refine them into Max because it's a bit more organic. So I feel like organic shapes are way easier to manage into ZBrush. And I'm just going to show you what this character looks like when I just finish all this of these detailed parts. This is where I'm at once I'm done with detailing part, after adding some of these scratches on almost all my parts. As you can see, I added the armored look to some of the pieces, not all of them. The chest part, if I just solo it. So let's talk a bit about how I managed to create the hair, head, and the hood. So when it comes to the head, I took some reference from Overwatch again to see how they manage their faces. And as you can see, it's a lot of clean surfaces with some clean edge as well. But you have to remember when you're creating this kind of stylized character, you still want to pay attention to anatomy. It just makes your character feel more believable even when stylized. So let's talk a bit about the hood, how I managed to make it. Let's just do a quick demo. So let's say I want to create kind of that shape. I won't do all the fine details, but just to show you how I made it. So what I would do is I would insert basic sphere or cube. You just need geo. So I just begin by using the move brush in order to get an idea of the shape I want. And you can use the transparent option in order to see the face under my sphere. And when you're sculpting in 3D, it's very good to check your mesh on all angles, so it doesn't feel weird when you're looking like up on your character or down. So let's remesh it so it's easier to control. Again, at this stage, I'm just using the move brush with a big value. So in order to create these clean shapes, I like to use the damp standard brush with low intensity but a huge brush size. I just use it inverted. Then I'll use it with in combination with edge polish in order to get some more clean shapes. So remeshed it again. So let's say I'm good with this shape. So what I would do after that is I would just begin to mask my mesh. Then I would hide my mask part and just use tail indent. So this is this button, you can find it into geometry. Where is it? I'm already in it. So modify topology, delete. In order to hide your mask, I don't know where it is. I can't find it. Since it's been a long time since I've been using this interface. I don't know where all the buttons are anymore. So what I would do from that is I would just ZBrush it again. You need to enable keep groups, so it will give you a more smooth result. Here we go. So it's not perfect, but just to show you how I managed to create the hood. Once I have this shape, all I do is I enable to my Z modeler and begin to use QMesh on polygroup island. And just like that, I can give it some thickness. As you can see, my normals are flipped. There is a easy fix for that. You just need to go into display properties and flip it. Again, it's just a matter of moving my shape, get it in place, and trying to have a nice result. And that's the idea of how I created the hood. So from here to here. So now let's talk a bit about the hair, how I managed to create this hair strand. So the technique I use is nothing fancy, it's probably the most basic technique. All I did is I just inserted a sphere again. Scale it a bit. So again, as you can see, the topology is a bit too high. So in order to have more control with my move brush, I ZBrush it again with low value. Let's turn down adaptive size. Give it some time. And here we have just a clean topology. It's fairly low. It's just super good to use my move brush on it now. It's way easier to control. So as you can see, it's a bit too thin here right now. So what I can do is can use my inflate brush to gain some thickness back. I like to use the pinch brush as well to get some thinner area, like in the tip and the boot. So once I'm at this stage, I can already divide it and begin to use the damp standard, but with a higher value this time. I can begin to create this kind of details. So I can use some edge polish as well to get some flat surface. As you can see, it's already giving me what I want. I like to use the pinch as well to gain some sharpness on some of the edges. And from here I can begin to refine with edge polish, pinch, and temp standard again. So all I do now is adding some edge polish stroke in order to gain some of that flat surface. Let's wait a bit for that to save. I don't have a great computer, as you can see. It takes a long time, but I'm used to it. Mm. Well, this project is a bit too heavy as well. That's why it's taking such a long time. Okay, just a minute. Wow. So this is what I have at the end. It's pretty clean. I could refine it a bit more again, but since this is just a demo, I won't go further. So after I'm done with my high poly, what I would do is I would decimate my mesh, so it will give me a lower res to export it into Max and begin Retopo. So this is what I already have here. If you can see, if I show you my topology. You can see this is all decimated, but with a high value. So I can use this mesh as well to bake in Marmoset or Substance. It's going to be to take a bit less time to do it since my computer is not that good. I like to do that in order to gain some time when baking. So once I'm done with my high poly, what I do is I export it back into Max again and begin to retopo from that mesh. Back in Max with my high poly. So from here, what I do is I begin to retopo. I won't show you the full process of Retopo, just some quick tips. For this character, I was aiming for the poly count of Overwatch characters, which is 35k for the character and 15k for the weapon. I might be wrong, but I think it's what it is. So let's just bring my low poly. So the main thing you want to do when retopo your character is you want to capture as much of the silhouette while maintaining low poly count. So as you can see from here, I have 34, almost 35k trees. So let's take like the leg just to show you what method I use. It's almost the same that I just show you in the beginning, which is just using the freeform tab and extruding some points, trying to match my shape. So let's isolate it. So I'm just going to remove some polygons. So again, pick a drawn surface, pick your mesh, and add some offset to it. Then I would just begin to extend again. And again, it's just a matter of placing your points while maintaining a low poly count. So this is what I would have in the end. Again, trying to maintain a low poly count and trying to match my silhouette as good as I can. So once you're done with your retopo and you have a good low poly, it's time to do some UVs for your character in order to bring it to substance and begin texturing. So what I did for this character is that I split it into 4 different UV maps. One for the body, one for the head, one for the hair, and finally one for the eye. I have 2 other one for the weapon and one for the base. And once you have all of this, you can bring it to either Marmoset or Substance if you want to bake. And I did all the baking into Marmoset for me because I like the baking into Marmoset. So I'm just going to show you what I do in Marmoset now. In Marmoset, what I do is I create a new baker where I bring my my low and high. As you can see, I renamed every part of my character. Like for the low, I add underscore low at the end, and for the high, I add underscore high. This is just better when you're loading your mesh. So it's going to place them into their respective high and low folders. And from here, I'm just going to show you what my high looks like. So I added some materials to it in order to bake an ID map as well. So this would help me into the texturing when in Painter. So from here, what you want to do here, I already have my maps baked. But just to show you what you would do is you would configure what you want to bake first, like your normals, your world space, your curvature, position, and ambient occlusion. Then you just hit bake and hope for the best. If you have some errors, what you can do sometimes is like you can adjust your cage. Like I don't know if this is going to show it to you. Again, it's not going to show you because I changed some folders, but what you can do is you can use these sliders in order to adjust your cage if you have some issue with your bake. And that's all for the baking into Marmoset. Now that my maps are baked, it's time to go and do some texturing into Painter. So texturing when it comes to stylized character is probably the most important part. So the main maps I use are the curvature and AO maps, but I also use position and world space maps to create some gradients. I'm just going to show you what my main material looks like. So I begin by creating a base with a base color, a base roughness, and base metallic. Then I begin to add some curvature information to it, just to make the edges pop a bit and add some color variation. For this one, I did put a second one to capture more of these sharp edges. So I'm just going to show you what my mask looks like. When it comes to curvature, I like to use the mask editor because it gives me more control over my curvature. So I had an issue with my mask, so I just painted some more of it here. And when it comes to stylized character, what you'll see a lot is I like to use some backlighting info. So this is what I did. I just add just a lighter value on top. So for this one, I like to use world space normals mask here for generator. Then I added some oxidation to it because it was supposed to be bronze. So this mask is just a combination of grunge and some curvature as well. So without the grunge, this is what it looks like, just a curvature with a sharpen. And on top of that, I like to add to another AO as well. I just use the multiply blending mode. So it adds a darker value in the AO, and I have higher roughness and a lower metallic, so it gets less light info into the cavities. So this layer is just a gradient for this part because in my scene in Marmoset it was getting a bit too light, so I decided to darken it a bit. And what I like to do on my material is also is to add some random roughness info to it. It just makes your material a bit more interesting to look at. So this is the mask I have. So it's just a lower roughness and lower metallic as well. And here we have some inverted curvature just to add some color variation again, since I was getting it was a bit boring to look at, so I added some purple to it and a bit of blue, but really light. Now that I'm done with my material, what I like to do is add some gradient to it. So just to show you some of them, what I like to use is 3D distance generator to create these gradients. So I'm just going to show you the mask. And as you can see, it's pretty great to create these gradients. It just adds some variation again to your model. Some of them I had to unpaint them because I wanted a really specific area to be affected. Then what I like to do as well is add some gradient again and some world space info. So this one is kind of like a backlight, but from the bottom. I wanted to make it darker from all the parts that are facing down. And I have a gradient from bottom to top just to, again, make my character feel a bit more grounded. You will find this method is used into the Overwatch characters, so that's why I did it. And on top of that, again, I had some color variation again. This is just a grunge with a gradient info. And after that, I like to add again some backlight info just to make my character pop a bit more in this area. So let's talk a bit about the face now. Let's just hide my body. So for the face, I use the same process for the base at least. So what I did is I used some curvature with a lighter color and some backlight as well, and some AO with a darker value and just some darker value. And for the rest, I just hand painted most of it, so I added some red in this area. I just see what it looks like. I just turn it down. And I painted the lips as well. So I added a gradient too to in order to make the neck feel like it's in shadows, because when I bring back my body, you can see that without it feels a bit weird. So I just added this to add some more shadow. So now that I'm done with my texturing, what I'll do is just exporting my maps and beginning to set up my scene into Marmoset. So let's jump into Marmoset now. Before getting into Marmoset, what I did is I just quickly paused my model into 3ds Max using a basic rig, but it's nothing worth showing you. So for this scene, what I wanted to do is I wanted to tell a story through my lighting and by adding this base as well. So let's just show you how I begin to light this scene. First, you want to choose a sky for this scene. So I chose this one with a low value for the brightness, just to lighten a bit my shadows. So this one kind of acts like a fill light. Then I would begin to add my lights one by one. So for example, this one would be my main lights. So it's coming from top left, it acts like moonlight. For this one I used something that's called a gel. It's just a basic black and white image, and it acts like a mask for the light. So as you can see, it adds these interesting shadows to it, and it gives her kind of an evil look too. So I decided to keep it. And for my main, I added a second light source as well, just to get some more light info in this area and for the base as well. Then from here, what I would do is I would begin to add some more fill lights. So this one is coming from the camera. If I just take my main, you can see it's coming from our direction. And it's just here to lighten the shadows again. And as you can see, this one has a blue tint to it, just to give it kind of a cold look as well. And same thing for this one, it's just coming from the right side. And I decided to use kind of an orange color to it as well, just to warm up a bit some of the shadows and give a nice feel of cold versus warm. Then I would just begin to add some rim lights to my scene, just to detach my character from the background. So this is what I have for my rim, and one for each weapon, just to detach them from the background. And so this is what it looks like when I enable all my lights. Just to show you as well, for this scene I decided to add some spark, just to convey that maybe there is a fire happening behind her. So these are just some planes with basic texture with alpha and an emissive. And I added a fog as well for creating this kind of smoke effect. And so this is what it looks like when I enable everything. Let's summarize what I did for this character. So at first I begin with my blocking, trying to match my silhouette and placing my main shapes. Here I just refine some of the shapes, but always keeping in mind my silhouette. Again, adding some more shapes, trying to find shapes that work together. So I didn't cover much of how I did the face, because it would take too much time in this video. But what you want to keep in mind when doing the stylized faces is you want to know your anatomy and get some good reference. So for this one I had a lot of Overwatch reference and some anatomy reference as well. So for the hand, what I did is I imported in Max a quick blocking that I did in ZBrush and began to box model on top of it. For the weapon was all done in Max, just some box modeling. Here I placed my weapon with my character just to see how these two work together. Then I refined some of my shape in Max, always keeping in mind my silhouette, trying to find shapes that are working together. Then I export back my refined shapes in ZBrush and begin to refine a bit more of them. Like here, I added some of the hair for my character, and I refined some of this middle part as well. Just refining the head also. And this was my final high poly for this character. So I just added the scratches, some damage to the edges, and the hammer look to some of the pieces. Then I bring back my height to max and begin to retopo. So I was aiming for the poly count of Overwatch characters. Then I UV my low poly and I begin to bake my maps in Marmoset. So I did some color iteration for this character just to get some good color combinations. So this was my final texture for this character. And this is the base color. Then I pause my character in max and begin to set up my scene in Marmoset. So what I like to do when creating this kind of scene is I want to create a story around my character. So this is what I did with this one. Like with the base, the hand is trying to reach this cross that could tell maybe she tried to kill a dude right here. And this spark and this orange light can convey that maybe there's a fire happening behind her. So this is just to tell a story. It could be any story for your characters, but it's really what makes your character feel alive. So this is the end of this breakdown. Thank you all for watching. And if you have any question regarding this character, feel free to ask me on my station. I'll try to respond as fast as I can. And thank you, Stylized Station, for letting me create this video.